The silence within the cryopods had lasted for centuries, a quiet so profound that even the most sensitive instruments would detect nothing but the faint hum of ancient machinery. Encased in stasis, humanity's last hope slumbered, awaiting the moment when their time would come once again. It had been 800,000 years since Earth's fall, a cataclysm that had shattered the cradle of civilization and scattered the remnants of its people across the cosmos. As the cryopods began to hiss and creak, the cold metal releasing its icy grip, the first of the cryo-sleepers stirred. Greg's fist smashed against the glass of his pod, a primal instinct to escape the suffocating darkness. Blood splattered as his desperate struggle finally shattered the barrier, and he tumbled out onto the chamber floor, gasping for air. Pain lanced through his muscles, atrophied from centuries of disuse, and his vision blurred in the dim light of the unfamiliar surroundings. The chamber around him was alien, a far cry from the sterile environments of Earth's cryo facilities. The metal walls were grimy, the displays flickering with outdated code, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and neglect. Tubes snaked between long rows of cryopods, some still hissing with life, while others remained dark and silent, their inhabitants long dead. As Greg's eyes adjusted, he noticed the other pods beginning to open, releasing the few who had survived the eons of sleep. His heart jolted when he recognized a familiar figure among them. Jake, his best friend from before the fall, staggered out of his pod, pale and emaciated. Behind him, Samantha, the mission commander, emerged with eyes wide in confusion and dawning horror. Before they could process the monstrous reality of their situation, a loud klaxon blared, splitting the air. An alert flashed on the screen, an alien language scrolling across the display, warning of an approaching ship. "Weapons primed!" Greg's pulse quickened as he realized they were not alone. Within moments, a sleek silver craft docked with their colony ship, its design unlike anything they had encountered before. The airlock screeched open and strange figures marched through, clad in gleaming red armor adorned with wicked-looking blades. The leader, a tall alien with mottled green skin and eyes that glittered like chips of obsidian, stepped forward. "I am Catharn of the Endorian Guard," the alien announced in accented English. "Your ship has triggered an orbital defense perimeter. Our sensors show your outdated markings match those used by human rebels who have long waged guerrilla war against us." The battered human survivors were dragged from the airlock by Catharn's grim-faced soldiers, pulse rifles jabbing into their spines. Armored transports rumbled through the colony ship's cavernous hold, alien engines growling like predators. The captives were shoved aboard, shackled to steel benches as the transports moved out, giving them a view of the vast Endorian megacity looming outside. Skyscrapers stabbed the smoggy sky like colossal thorns, neon signs flickering with holographic advertisements for everything from neural implants to memory scrubbing. The transports plunged into the urban canyons, weaving between the air traffic before touching down at a fortified black citadel, festooned with guard towers and electrified razor wire. The humans stumbled, out, the air heavy with the scent of ozone from recent battles. They were prodded into the complex, where bone-white corridors stretched as far as the eye could see. Greg and the others were split up, dragged down branching hallways to separate interrogation cells. Thrown into a stark white room, Greg found himself clamped to a metal chair bolted to the floor. The door hissed open and a figure entered, General Zorg, clad in a blood-red uniform that matched his corpse-gray skin. His ultraviolet eyes glowed with a predatory hunger as he uncoiled an electrified lash from his belt. "I find torture distasteful," Zorg said, his voice a cold, calculated sneer. "But you humans respond best to primal methods. By the time I'm done, you'll be spilling every secret of your pathetic resistance." The lash cracked across Greg's chest, searing pain flooding his senses. But he gritted his teeth, staring defiantly back at Zorg. They had survived centuries to get here. He'd be damned if he'd break now. He clung to one thought. No matter how impossible it seemed, they had to escape this place, to find a way to fight back. This prison would not be their tomb. As the door closed behind Zorg, Greg's mind raced, planning his next move. He had to escape and find the others. Time passed in a blur of agony and defiance until finally an opportunity presented itself. Using a shard of plastic he'd managed to conceal, Greg worked at the restraints until they gave way. His muscles screamed in protest as he moved, but adrenaline kept him going. He crept through the bone-colored corridor, each step a battle against the suffocating silence. He reached Jake's cell first, fumbling with the door controls until they sparked and disengaged. Jake stumbled out, eyes wild with fear. "Greg, how—" "No time," Greg hissed, already moving to Samantha's cell. Moments later, the trio huddled at an intersection, scanning for guards. "What's the plan?" Samantha's voice was hoarse from disuse. Before Greg could answer, alarms blared and red emergency lights bathed the corridor in a hellish glow. Boots thundered in the distance. "Run!" Greg shouted. They sprinted through the labyrinth of corridors, dodging energy bolts that scorched the walls. Greg's atrophied muscles screamed, but fear and adrenaline kept him moving. A blast door slammed shut ahead, cutting off their escape. "It's over," Samantha whispered, her voice filled with despair. But Greg refused to give up. "Not yet," he growled, his mind racing for a solution. They emerged into a hangar bay where a battered transport idled, its engines humming with barely contained energy. A figure stood beside it, removing a helmet to reveal azure skin and antenna. "I'm Alara," she said, her voice urgent. "We don't have much time." As they boarded, a gruff voice called out from the cockpit. "Cutting it a bit close, aren't you?" A burly man with a salt and pepper beard stood at the controls. "Where are we going?" Jake asked. "To the last place they'd expect us," the man replied. The display showed a massive armada hanging in space, weapons primed. At its center loomed a monstrous dreadnought, bristling with gun emplacements. "That would be my doing," a voice answered from the rear of the transport. They spun to see Jeremiah Holt, a fellow survivor from the cryopods, emerging from the shadows with a pulse pistol trained on them. "Jeremiah?" Greg's mind reeled. "But why? You idiots still don't get it, do you?" Jeremiah's face twisted with contempt. "Humanity lost. The Andorians won. I'm just making sure I end up on the winning side." Outside, space lit up as the rebel ships engaged the Andorian fleet. Their transport shuddered under the onslaught, but Alara's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not alone." Her antenna twitched as she scanned the sensors. "There's an old research facility on Tho Station. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Tho Station rose from the cratered surface of a desolate moon, a sprawling complex of domes and spires. They touched down in a hidden hangar, greeted by a grizzled human with cybernetic implants gleaming at his temples. "Admiral Thorne," Alara said with a nod. "We've go. Survivors from Earth." Thorne's augmented eye whirred as he scanned them. "Follow me." "Quickly!" They hurried through winding corridors until they reached a bustling command center. Holograms flickered, showing Andorian fleet movements. "We'll do it," Greg said, squaring his shoulders. The next week was a blur of training and preparation. They studied schematics, ran simulations, and pushed their bodies to the limit. On the eve of the mission, Greg found Alara alone in the hangar bay, methodically checking her gear. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. She paused, her antenna drooping slightly. "Because what my people are doing is wrong, and because I've seen how humans fight, with a tenacity I've never witnessed before. If anyone can overcome impossible odds, it's your kind." The infiltration began under cover of an asteroid storm, their stealth shuttle slipping past the facility's outer defenses, aided by Alara's inside knowledge. They touched down in a maintenance bay, the team moving with practiced precision. They reached the central lab without incident, where the FTL drive they sought sat on a pedestal, a gleaming orb of swirling energy. "I got a bad feeling about this," Jake muttered as Greg moved to secure the device. "Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared for you, vermin?" Andorian troops poured in from hidden alcoves, energy bolts filling the air as the humans dove for cover. "It was Jeremiah!" Samantha shouted, returning fire. He must have warned them. What followed was utter chaos. Jake's explosives tore holes in the walls as they fought their way out. Samantha took a plasma bolt to the chest, protecting Greg from a sniper. He hefted her limp form over his shoulder, desperation lending him strength. "Fall back!" he roared. They stumbled onto their shuttle, Greg laying Samantha on the deck as her breath came in ragged gasps, her uniform charred and smoking. The journey back to Tho Station was a nightmare of pursuit and near misses. By the time they touched down, Samantha's pulse was threadbare, her skin waxy and pale. Medics rushed her to surgery as Thorne examined the stolen drive. "We did it," he breathed. "With this, we might have a chance." But their victory was short-lived. A chilling voice echoed through the comms. "You have stolen from us," Catharn hissed. "Now we will take everything from you." The first salvo reduced a third of the station to rubble. In the chaos of evacuation, Greg found himself in a lab where white-coated scientists scurried around banks of machinery. A woman with close-cropped silver hair barked orders. "Behold," she said, "the next step in human evolution." The augmented pilots launched in experimental fighters, their movements unnaturally swift and precise. On tactical displays, Endorian ships began to blink out of existence at an alarming rate. "It's a holding action," Thorne said grimly. "Earth is lost, but humanity will survive. That's what matters now." As Greg strapped in beside his friends, he cast one last look at the savage space battle unfolding beyond the hangar shields. Humanity would endure, but at what cost? "Status report," Admiral Thorne barked, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned readouts. "Multiple hull breaches," a technician called out. "FTL drive offline. We're running on auxiliary power." A ping from the long-range sensors drew everyone's attention. "Sir," the sensor operator said, "I'm picking up a massive structure. It's sanctuary." Days blurred together as the survivors integrated into the hidden rebel base. Greg found himself in a solemn gathering, paying respects to those lost in the Battle of Tho Station. The weight of their sacrifice pressed down on him like a physical thing. As the ceremony concluded, Lyra Thorne stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming under the harsh lights. "We have made a breakthrough," she announced, her voice carrying a mix of hope and trepidation. "The Endorian FTL drive has been successfully reverse-engineered." Murmur rippled through the assembled crowd. Lyra continued, "This technology could be our salvation, allowing us to escape the Empire's reach and find a new home. But the path ahead is treacherous. We must navigate unmapped jump points, each one a potential death trap." Admiral Thorne's organic eye narrowed. "You understand the risks, Henderson?" The next hours were a flurry of preparation. Greg handpicked his team: Jake, steady and dependable; Alara, her alien insight invaluable; and a core group of hand-augmented pilots, their eerie golden eyes promising superhuman reflexes. The sleek stealth fighters slipped out of Sanctuary's shielded hangar, their matte black hulls swallowing light as they approached the swirling vortex of the jump point. Greg's hands tightened on the controls. "All units prepare for jump," he transmitted. "May whatever gods are left watch over us." The universe twisted, reality itself seeming to scream as they plunged into the maelstrom. For an eternal instant, Greg felt his body stretched to impossible lengths, his mind teetering on the edge of madness. Then, with a gut-wrenching jolt, they re-emerged into normal space. They had materialized in the midst of a debris field, jagged chunks of rock and twisted metal hurtling past at lethal velocities. Two of the hand pilots weren't fast enough, their ships disintegrating in silent explosions. "Form up!" Greg ordered, his voice tight. "Let's find somewhere to catch our breath and get our bearings." They limped to a nearby terrestrial world, its icy surface a stark white against the void. As they entered low orbit, Alara's voice crackled over the comms. "Greg, I'm picking up energy signatures. Someone's down there." "Ambush!" Jake yelled as a hail of weapons fire lanced out from the newcomers. Even with their augmented reflexes, the hand pilots struggled to evade. Greg's fighter shuddered as a glancing blow tore through his port wing. "Break formation," he ordered. Evasive pattern delta. As Greg desperately tried to shake a pursuer, he caught glimpses of the carnage unfolding. Hand pilots, their eyes blazing with psionic energy, managed to score hits on the sleek enemy craft, but for every small victory, the humans paid in blood. A stray energy bolt clipped Greg's fighter, sending him into an uncontrolled spin. As he struggled to regain control, his sensors picked up a transmission from the surface. What he saw chilled him to the bone. Corpses, hundreds, maybe thousands of alien bodies, their forms twisted and mutilated. And standing among them, armored figures that could only be their attackers, the Black Guard. "They're monsters," Greg breathed. "We have to warn the others." An explosion rocked his fighter, cutting off the transmission. Warnings flashed across his console as systems failed one by one. "All units, emergency jump!" Greg shouted. "Random coordinates!" As his crippled craft plummeted toward the icy world below, Greg saw the swirling vortex of multiple jump points opening. But in his haste to save his team, he realized with sickening clarity that he had just handed the Black Guard a path straight to Sanctuary. Greg's eyes snapped open, consciousness flooding back in a rush of pain and disorientation. Frigid air bit at his exposed skin as he took in the crumpled cockpit around him. Warning lights flashed, casting an eerie red glow across shattered displays. He fumbled for the emergency release, muscles screaming in protest as he hauled himself from the wreckage. Wind howled across a desolate expanse of ice and snow, visibility near zero in the raging blizzard. "Come on," Greg muttered, forcing numb fingers to activate his suit's distress beacon. A faint chirp confirmed the signal was transmitting. He could only hope it had reached the others before they jumped. Hours passed in a haze of cold and exhaustion. Greg huddled in the meager shelter of his downed fighter, fighting to stay awake. Just as hypothermia threatened to claim him, his comm crackled to life. "We know," Thorne interrupted. "Your warning came through. We're maintaining stealth protocols, but we're coming for you." Days blurred together as Greg fought for survival in the frozen wasteland. His rations dwindled, the cold seeped into his bones. Just when he thought he couldn't hold on any longer, salvation arrived. A team of figures materialized through the swirling snow, moving with practiced efficiency. Their leader, a woman with piercing eyes and a face weathered by countless missions, crouched beside him. "Greg?" she asked, her voice cutting through the storm. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. Two Pathfinders caught him, supporting his weight as they hurried him toward a waiting transport. "The Black Guard," Greg rasped. "They're coming!" They hadn't made it more than a kilometer when the first Endorian drones appeared, sleek shapes darting through the storm. Energy bolts sizzled past as the Pathfinders returned fire. "Incoming!" one of the team shouted. A massive shape loomed out of the whiteout, an Endorian dropship. "Run!" the woman ordered, laying down covering fire. The Pathfinders scattered, using the terrain to their advantage. Greg's mind raced, recalling the landscape he'd seen from the air. "This way!" he shouted, gesturing toward a shadowy crevice in the distance. They plunged into the maze like network of ice caves, the Black Guard in relentless pursuit. The rebels used every trick in their arsenal: traps, ambushes, misdirection. But their cybernetic foes seemed unstoppable. In the chaos, Greg found himself separated from the others. He stumbled through a narrow passage, emerging into a vast chamber that took his breath away. Ruins of an impossibly ancient city stretched before him, perfectly preserved in the ice. Greg sprinted deeper into the ruins, his heart pounding. He vaulted over fallen pillars and ducked under crumbling arches, searching desperately for a way out. The sound of heavy footfalls grew closer with each passing second. "I won't die here," Greg muttered to himself, forcing his exhausted body to move faster. He reached a central plaza where an alien artifact pulsed with a strange, otherworldly light. Greg's fingers flew across the alien controls, driven by instinct more than understanding. The artifact hummed to life as the first Black Guard warrior rounded the corner. Time seemed to slow. Greg saw the Endorian raise its weapon, saw the energy building within the barrel. He threw himself to the side as the blast tore through the air where he'd been standing moments before. The firefight that followed was unlike anything Greg had experienced. The chamber echoed with the sound of advanced weaponry and shattering ice. He caught glimpses of Talia and her team as they joined the fray, their coordinated attacks keeping the Black Guard at bay. As the last rebel craft lifted off, Greg caught a final glimpse of the frozen city. His discovery had raised more questions than answers, but one thing was clear: the stakes of this war had just become infinitely higher. The return to Sanctuary passed in a blur of debriefings and medical examinations. Greg's mind whirled with the implications of what they'd found. It wasn't until he stepped onto the main concourse that reality truly sank in. Samantha was there, her face a mix of relief and something more. She crossed the distance between them in quick strides, pulling Greg into a fierce embrace. Admiral Thorne's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a crisis unlike any in human history. The Endorian Black Guard isn't just an enemy force. They're carrying out a systematic genocide of advanced alien civilizations." A stunned silence fell over the room. Greg felt a chill run down his spine as he recalled the vast field of alien corpses on the icy world. Their quiet exchange was interrupted by a commotion at the chamber's entrance. Samantha burst in, her face flushed with exertion. "Admiral," she called out, "we've got life signs from inside the pod." The room erupted into chaos. Admiral Thorne barked orders, patching medical teams and security details. Greg found himself swept along in the tide of bodies rushing toward the containment lab. As they approached the sealed chamber, Greg's skin crawled with an alien energy. The pod pulsed with an otherworldly light, its surface rippling like liquid metal. A team of medics huddled around a bank of monitors, their faces a mix of awe and fear. The pod split open with a hiss of escaping gases. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a slender hand emerged from the mist, followed by a figure of breathtaking beauty. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, her eyes holding the wisdom of eons. "I am Aquila," she said, her voice resonating with power, "last of the Celestri, and I have awoken to a galaxy in flames." The assembled humans stood in stunned silence as Aquila's gaze swept over them. When her eyes met Greg's, he felt a jolt of recognition, not of her specifically, but of something ancient and profound stirring within his very DNA. "You have questions," Aquila continued, stepping gracefully from the pod. "About the Andorians, about the Black Guard, about the fate that befell my people." Her expression darkened. "I have answers, but you may not like what you hear." She tapped a control, and Greg felt his body lifted from the floor. He floated, suspended in a shimmering stasis field as Aquila paced around him. "I imagine your confusion," she said, her tone almost sympathetic. "Allow me to illuminate the situation. My role, my true purpose, is to ensure the resurrection of the Celestri by any means necessary." Greg's mind reeled. He tried to speak, but his vocal cords remained frozen. Aquila's gaze bore into him. "Your DNA, Greg Henderson, is the key. Humanity's genetic potential, when combined with Celestrian technology." She smiled, a predator's grin. "We will create a new hybrid race under my control, of course." As if summoned by her words, a procession of stasis fields drifted into view. Admiral Thorne, Samantha, Jake. Their faces contorted in silent rage or terror, all imprisoned. "Your leaders will witness the dawn of a new era," Aquila declared. She gestured, and Greg's field separated from the others. "But you, Greg, you have a special role to play." The stasis field propelled Greg through winding corridors of gleaming alien metal. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with pulsing, organic-looking machinery. At its center stood a towering apparatus, dripping with cybernetic tendrils. Greg's heart hammered against his ribs as the implication sank in. He wanted to scream, to fight, but remained helplessly immobile as Aquila guided his suspended form toward the machine. Aquila's eyes flashed with almost unchecked fury. "You know nothing of what I must do," she hissed. "My people are gone, Greg. Billions of years of culture and achievement, wiped out. I will not let that stand." She activated the device, and searing pain lanced through Greg's body. He convulsed as cybernetic probes pierced his skin, injecting streams of glowing nanites. Through his agony, he glimpsed a familiar face. Alara, her alien features a mask of conflicted anguish as she monitored his vitals. "I'm sorry," Alara whispered, her gaze meeting Greg's for a fleeting moment before she turned back to her console. Time lost all meaning as Greg's DNA was systematically rewritten, Celestrian genetic code fused with his human physiology, unlocking dormant potential even as it tore him apart at the molecular level. He screamed soundlessly, his mind retreating from the onslaught of sensation. Alarms blared, cutting through the haze of torment. Aquila whirled toward a holographic display, her eyes widening in shock. The chamber shuddered as explosions rocked the Celestrian dreadnought. In the chaos, Greg felt the machine's hold on him weaken, the newly awakened power within him surging, no longer contained. "What have I done?" Aquila whispered, her voice trembling with fear and regret. The words barely registered as Greg's mind, now a maelstrom of raw energy and alien knowledge, fought to reassert control. He lashed out with his new abilities, shattering the stasis field and tearing free from the machine's grasp. Aquila's expression twisted with rage as she raised a hand, summoning a wave of energy to strike him down. But Greg was faster, his reflexes and instincts now heightened to superhuman levels. He dodged the attack and retaliated with a burst of psionic force, sending Aquila crashing into a nearby console. The chamber convulsed, its walls rippling like liquid as the dreadnought's systems began to fail. "You can't stop this, Greg," Aquila spat, her voice dripping with venom. "The Celestri will rise again, and you will be their harbinger." Greg shook his head, his mind clearing as he focused on a singular goal. "No, Aquila, this ends here. With a final surge of power, he unleashed a devastating wave of energy, obliterating the chamber and everything within it. The dreadnought shuddered violently, its structural integrity failing as the energy cascade spread through its systems. Greg felt the ship lurch as it began to break apart, the alien metal twisting and buckling under the strain. He had seconds to act. Summoning the last of his strength, he projected a psychic beacon, calling out to the others. "Jake, Samantha, Admiral, I'm coming for you." Their responses came in rapid succession, tinged with disbelief and hope. "Greg, is that you?" "We're here, Greg." "Hurry! Get us out of this hellhole, son!" Greg sprinted through the collapsing corridors, his enhanced senses guiding him toward the holding cells. He reached the first chamber, his psionic energy tearing through the locks as if they were paper. Samantha staggered out, her face pale but determined. "Greg, you're alive." "No time for reunions," he replied, his voice strained. "We need to get to the others." They moved with speed and precision, freeing Jake and Thorn before making their way to the hangar bay. By the time they arrived, the dreadnought was in its death throes, explosions ripping through its core. The remaining Black Guard soldiers had fallen back, their resistance futile against Greg's new abilities. "Get to the transport!" Greg ordered, his voice carrying over the chaos. "I'll hold them off." Samantha grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with concern. "You can't take them all on, Greg." "You'll die!" Greg met her gaze, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "I don't plan on dying, Sam. Not today." He pushed her toward the transport, his mind already focused on the approaching Black Guard reinforcements. As the transport lifted off, Greg unleashed a torrent of psionic energy, ripping through the enemy forces with a ferocity that surprised even him. The dreadnought continued to disintegrate around him, but Greg remained a beacon of defiance, his power growing with each passing moment. Finally, as the last of the Black Guard fell, Greg turned his attention to the collapsing structure. He knew there was no way out, but that didn't matter. His mission was complete. "It's over," he whispered. A sense of peace washing over him as the dreadnought's hull buckled and imploded, taking him with it. The transport hurtled through space, the crew watching in stunned silence as the Celestrian dreadnought disintegrated in a cataclysmic explosion. Samantha's eyes were fixed on the viewports, her heart heavy with grief. "He's gone," she whispered, tears streaming. Down her face. Thorn placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression somber. "He saved us all, Samantha. We have to honor his sacrifice." As the transport sped toward Sanctuary, a faint signal crackled over the comms. "Samantha, it's Greg. I'm alive." Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what had happened. Greg had survived, his consciousness preserved within the Celestrian technology. He was no longer entirely human, but he was still Greg. "We're coming for you," Samantha replied, her voice filled with renewed hope. The journey back to Sanctuary was fraught with tension and uncertainty. Greg's transformation had saved them, but at what cost? As they approached the rebel base, the implications of his newfound abilities weighed heavily on their minds. Upon arrival, Greg was immediately quarantined and subjected to rigorous testing. His body, now a hybrid of human and Celestrian DNA, exhibited unprecedented levels of strength, speed, and cognitive ability. But with these enhancements came a profound alien presence, one that threatened to overwhelm his human identity. Admiral Thorn and the rebel leadership convened to discuss the situation. "We can't ignore the potential benefits of Greg's transformation," Thorn began, his tone measured. "But we also can't afford to underestimate the risks. We need to find a way to ensure that Greg remains in control." "What if we can't?" Samantha countered, her voice tinged with concern. "What if he loses himself to the alien influence? We could be facing a threat greater than the Endorians." The room fell into a heavy silence as the implications sank in. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. Humanity's struggle for survival had entered a new phase, one that would require them to adapt in ways they had never imagined. Greg, now fully aware of the immense power coursing through him, grappled with his new reality. The alien presence within him was not malevolent, but it was driven by a singular purpose, the resurrection of the Celestri. It took every ounce of his willpower to keep it at bay. He spent hours in meditation, focusing on the memories of his humanity, the faces of those he loved and fought for. It was a constant battle, but with each passing day, Greg grew more adept at wielding his new abilities without succumbing to the alien influence. His first real test came when the Andorians launched a surprise assault on Sanctuary. The rebel base was ill-prepared for the onslaught, and panic spread like wildfire. But Greg remained calm, his mind reaching out to the other survivors, rallying them with a surge of collective resolve. He led the defense, coordinating strikes with a precision that bordered on the preternatural. His enhanced senses allowed him to anticipate the enemy's movements, turning the tide of battle in the rebels' favor. But the cost was high. Sanctuary lay in ruins, its infrastructure crippled, and countless lives lost. Greg's victory was bittersweet, marred by the knowledge that his new powers made him both a savior and a potential threat. In the aftermath of the battle, the rebel leadership convened once more. "Sanctuary can no longer serve as our base of operations," Thorne declared, his voice tinged with resignation. "We need to relocate, and quickly." "Where do we go from here?" Samantha asked, her eyes searching Greg's face for answers. Greg looked out at the devastated landscape, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We find a new home," he said, his voice steady, "one that the Andorians can't touch." The search for a new base took them to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where remnants of ancient civilizations lay hidden among the stars. They scoured abandoned planets, asteroid belts, and derelict space stations, all the while dodging Andorian patrols and blackguard ambushes. It was during one of these explorations that they stumbled upon a long-forgotten world, its surface littered with the ruins of a once great empire. The atmosphere was toxic, and the landscape barren, but deep within the planet's core, they found something that gave them hope, an ancient Celestian stronghold untouched by time. The stronghold was a marvel of alien engineering, its halls lined with advanced technology that had long since been lost to.